everybody. Welcome to Track 5, Leadership in Action, for really lessons learned regarding CDO's data efforts. My name is Bob Audette. I am a partner at Guidehouse in their data management practice. Today's session is really focused on AI-led ESG analytics efforts and really trying to build a sustainable portfolio through responsible investing. So we're going to really learn about what AI-enabled analytics and how that is supporting ESG. So a couple of housekeeping things related to today's session. It's going to be recorded. That'll be available through the Whova app. 3 months from now, you should be able to actually access this video clip through the Symposium YouTube channel. So that's 3 months from now. And a couple of things regarding Q&A, especially for those in the room, because we also have many individuals that are participating online. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and then I will give you the mic, at which point then please ask your question. Otherwise, no one online will actually hear what your question is. So if you could kindly follow that guidance, I would greatly appreciate that. For those that are online, please use the Whova app and those in the room as well, feel free to use the Whova app as well to pose any questions you might have. So with that, I'd like to introduce our today's speaker, Sanjay Patil, Senior Client Solutions Partner at Quantiphi. Sanjay is a Senior Client Solutions Partner at Quantiphi and leads their Google Cloud business in the US Northeast. He's passionate, has a lot of expertise in data, AI, ML solutions, and really building transformational roadmaps for customers, helping them harness the power of data on the cloud. He holds multiple different master degrees in marketing analytics and an MBA in marketing as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Sanjay.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks so much, Rob, for the introduction. In addition to the introduction that Rob just gave, I want to spend maybe 30 seconds just letting you know who you're listening to, and then we'll get into the topic. So my name is Sanjay Patil. I landed in the US back in 2015, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through all 7 years. I'm just going to let you guys know what I did. So I graduated from right outside of Boston here in Bentley University with the Masters in Analytics and an MBA in Marketing, and spent about a year with CVS Health. And then for the last 4 years, I've been in the AI analytics and the cloud space working with Quantiphi. In my current role, like Rob alluded to, I run our Google Cloud business for the US Northeast region. So happy to meet you all. And glad to be here to give a talk on what we have achieved, from an impact standpoint when it comes to AI-led analytics in the ESG space. As I was preparing for this talk, and I was trying to think of an anecdote that can kick things off and hook people online and in the room together. And I was just, in the last 2 days, I scratched my mind on what could be something that people can relate to at this point in time. I just wanted to leave you guys with the message, keeping in mind the last 3 years and especially the last few months about gratitude and empathy. So in your daily lives this week, just think of the things that are around you, be empathetic, and have that gratitude towards the people you interact with. So I just wanted to make sure that we do have a global audience here. So I just wanted to call that out and remind everybody of those things which are important. And the second thing that, we received an email, and bless the soul who sent that email yesterday, saying there won't be access to your speaker notes, so you'll have to make sure that you get your cue cards ready. And as I was writing these down, I realized 2 things. One, there's paper cuts that still exist. It can happen. And 2, that I don't write really well. So during the talk, if you see me surprised when I look at these or squint my eyes, it's just because I don't understand what I've written. And there's nothing wrong with the presentation. Okay? I just wanted to call those things out. And what we will do in the next 45 minutes, and I'll try to keep this interactive, is we'll go through, I'll spend a few minutes letting you guys know. You saw the video. I'll just spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes on letting you guys know who Quantiphi is and what we do and what the company has been doing. And then we'll talk about the ESG ecosystem, what are the key players, what are some of the trends that are happening, and where is the system heading as of now. And then we'll dive into two very real instances of how data has helped the ESG ecosystem, then really summarize with what we go through today in the next 40 minutes, like I said. Extending from the video, just talking a little bit about Quantiphi. We're an award-winning AI-first digital engineering company. We're headquartered right outside of Boston in the Marlborough area. We started off in 2013 and have a global presence with workforce spread across North America, Europe, and India, where we do have our delivery workforce based out of. We do have people in North America too, but majority of our engineering workforce is back in India. And some of the solution areas that you'll hear our name come up with again and again is primarily anything to do with data and AI. We started off as a AI niche company who solved problems that were difficult to tackle back in early 2010s. And then we extended our portfolio to cover more and more solutions, including conversational AI, doc AI, marketing analytics, and more recently gotten into, over the last 18 months, into SAP and managed services as well. On the rightmost side, you will also see some of the analysts and industry recognition that Quantiphi has garnered over the last few years of existence. Everest Group, IDC, Forrester have got. Oh, this side of the table? Yeah. Oh, thank you. So yeah, over the last almost 10 years of existence, we have been recognized by industry leaders and analyst groups for the services that we have provided. We do have a premier partnership with Google Cloud, where we are highly differentiated in terms of the services that we provide. Last 6 years is where we have been the partners with Google Cloud, and all the 6 years we have been recognized as one of their top partners in various fields. Starting from machine learning, data, for this, we were also the social impact partner of the year in 2019 for the work we did with nonprofits and healthcare institutions. The workforce that I alluded to earlier, we do have close to 900 people certified to do Google Cloud technology work, and then Looker being another key technology within the portfolio, we also have people who can do work in that area. And in terms of what do we offer as solutions, right? We provide engineering solutions and services in two broad categories. Data and infrastructure, and then applied AI and machine learning. What we really focus on in these two pillars is to enable businesses to harness the power of platform, big data, and business intelligence to prepare their data for high-value business use cases, and then being able to push those high-value business use cases and provide the impact of machine learning to generate insights, automation, and experiences, which will help them gather quality data, which can then be pumped back into the infrastructure layer so that the apps can grow and scale to provide more value. We do operate across industries. We have established business units who collaborate with our technology leaders to be able to provide the best solutions for our customers. So that's who we are. 2013 we started, AI was the niche, expanded our portfolio and global presence, and then got into two main pillars of solutions that we offer now, and we'd love to chat with you guys further as well. Getting into the topic for today, the ESG ecosystem, that we want to understand how AI can enable and empower the ecosystem here. As most of you will be aware, ESG as a concept has evolved over decades, and more so in the last decade itself. Some of the facts that we were able to gather, and when we share the slides, we'll get the sources for you. Almost 30 trillion in wealth is being transferred from generational wealth transferred from baby boomers to millennials, which really shows a lot of potential for ESG investing. And when you look at the funds managed and the performances of the funds managed, more than 10,000 of those now, usually or often perform better than traditional funds when it comes to ESG funds. And also in terms of the growth, just in 2021, 40% year-over-year growth was seen for the funds across 32 currencies. It's not concentrated; it's spreading across different currencies. And as much as the system has come together in the last decade, what it has also seen and surfaced is the challenges that come with it. And where do we really see the next frontier of how this can be unleashed for people to make the most of it? Two broad areas of where the challenges have surfaced is the first three that you see there at the left-hand bottom corner are majorly surrounding around standardization. Like how do you measure and validate the right amount of data? And then there's various taxonomies and frameworks that are provided by various analyst firms. Getting to a standard is becoming a challenge. And also materiality. So a lot of measures companies take, non-financial measures, need to be materially converted into financial impacts. So that becomes a challenge when it comes to ESG measurement. And in standardization in terms of reporting and scoring these aspects, that when it comes to how do you rate a company, what is the standard to be followed and scored them on, that becomes another challenge. And also two main aspects of where people are heavily investing resources now is the data and assistive technology for companies to be able to report out their efforts in a meaningful way. So some of these areas where all the players, main participants that you can see, the index providers, companies, asset managers, and the rest of them are really working towards in investing into solving these problems, so that the ideal state where we have high quality data, standardized ratings, materiality and value driven asset frameworks, technology centric solutions, these things can be realized, and ESG as an ecosystem can flourish and be adopted across more and more regions and areas. From this ecosystem, what we've seen, being in the applied solutions space and what we have delivered for our customers, I'm going to talk about two broad areas where we have seen the impact, and there's a huge potential in the second area that we can explore further. The first aspect is on the power of text data, which we've realized, specifically talking about the news articles and publications as a source of data. What can be done with that corpus of data? And the second aspect is really the potential of image data that's brewing across everywhere, and how can that be leveraged to help implement use cases and solutions that are ESG centric. We'll dive deep into the first one, and I'll spend a few minutes towards the end talking about the potential of data as well. Image data as well. The first one really where we're going to deep dive a little bit. We work with a client which had a large corpus of published news articles and other publications, basically, which they had worked on building a custom taxonomy which enabled them to index these and be able to share these globally with people who want to leverage articles for business, finance, and investing purposes. The corpus of database, they did make it available through a RESTful API for us to be able to do it. And some of the numbers, the data that they had collected was 30 plus years, almost 10,000 sources of data that was, with the client, and close to over 1 billion articles that they had published. The question they wanted to answer with visibility to that data was, can news be used to identify the impact of ESG factors upon a portfolio? So they had two main things going for them. One was the news articles on ESG, which they could categorize, and then the list of global companies in their portfolio that they were trying to understand a little bit more better. And what we tried to do with the information that was available, the question they were trying to answer, is really leverage the power of technology, and specifically natural language processing and graph databases, to be able to answer the question, can this data be leveraged to understand companies a little bit more in terms of their ESG efforts and things that they were doing in that domain. The process of getting started to be able to answer that question for us, when it began, even though the corpus of data existed, was to be able to identify the right data. You need to identify what really is important for us to be able to answer that question successfully. So we extracted the right data set by three main parameters, right? Subject code, the publication date, and also the company relevance. The subject code were things that we use were like air, water, land, shareholder activism, workplace safety, and all these subject codes across publication date for 3 years, is where we ran the query. The query ran on Google's BigQuery, and it fetched a result of more than 2,000 related articles for the companies in focus. They had about 200 plus companies in their focus that they wanted to study. And we fetched about more than 2,000 articles on which we could do further analysis to understand if these companies are working towards a better ESG initiative. And the next step really is, when we identified these articles, was being able to understand what these articles contain and how contextually they could help us understand the efforts of the companies. So we ran full text articles through NLP pipeline, and we used various technologies comprising of open source technologies primarily, including Spacey, Stanford's Core NLP, and then Google Cloud's natural language, to be able to do sentiment analysis, which we'll talk about in the further slides. The key here really in the pre-processing step was to be able to cleanse the data, so that all the articles, we were able to clean the bylines, the footers, remove the text that doesn't have to be or doesn't directly impact the analysis that we were trying to do. So that was the initial step from a pre-processing standpoint. So we filtered the news data, got to the articles that are relevant, built a pipeline to be able to understand these articles better, and then from an analyze and visualize standpoint, being able to look at the data in a meaningful way so that we can understand what the data is trying to tell us. And from after the cleaning of data from extra text that was there, the next few steps really will get a little technical, but I'll try to be as elaborate as I can to be able to make this more relatable to the broader audience as well. We went into two main aspects of understanding the text. One is extracting the entities using Spacey's pre-trained neural network models that gave 1,000+ entities that were made available, including organizations, people, dates, etc. So the first exercise was to be able to extract these entities. And the second effort was to identify relationship between each of these entities. When we do surface these entities up, what are the relationship between? And that's where Stanford's Core NLP module helped us build those relationships and extrapolate them to drive insights. And from a visualization standpoint, we chose to do it as a graph to be able to more easily explain how these relationships work. So in each of the graphs that were on the top there, you will see the main node itself is an entity. So that could be a company, which is represented as a node. And the edges and the lines would primarily be the relationship between the entities. We combined these as we moved forward, and also created, the data was spread across 3 years, like I mentioned. And we created a timeline of how these relationships are growing so that we could get an understanding of the changing nature of a company, what they're doing over a period of time, and how they're evolving over a period of time when it comes to contributing towards taking measures that are ESG centric. Knowing these graphs and knowing these relationships that we could establish over a period of time, we then used, we had to identify what language are these, entities and relationships communicating in. We needed to identify the vocabulary associated with the most relevant ESG topics. So we used a technique called latent dialect allocation, which really tries to understand a group of. It's a generative model. It's a generative statistical model which tries to explain a set of observations through unobserved groups. So, for example, if the topic, one of the topics being spoken about is a board seat change between few groups of companies, and it occurs again and again in both those nodes, they establishes from a frequency standpoint a relationship. And then move forward to understand the similarities between the groups, and then compare and contrast them. For the second piece, that was once we identify the topics, the relationship between them, and being able to move these at a sentence and article level, we wanted to understand what are the sentiments each of these are driving. We used Google Cloud's natural language APIs to be able to understand, what sentiment is the topic driving, and it gives out result in two different areas. One is the score itself, +1 to -1 for negative to positive sentiment, and also the magnitude of that sentiment in terms of how positive it is and how negative it is. Collecting the two key pieces of information from a relationship standpoint and sentiment standpoint, we would try to answer a few questions that would really add value in knowing if news data is impactful in creating a solution here. First question, which we tried to answer, was which companies and topics are most relevant to the selected portfolio's ESG performance, according to the news again, because the data that we started off with was all published content. One of the main things, once we understood the entity relationship, we looked at the most connected entities in the graph. And the number of connections, each entity, the number of lines that went through each node, which was termed as an entity. And then be able to have relevant organizations based on their node degree centrality. So for example, if we ranked them by the number of connections each node was able to drive when it came to identifying ESG related topics. So that the node with the higher connections was ranked higher than, more connections was ranked higher than others from an entity relationship standpoint. And then we matched those relevant issues per company were also found in the matching news topics that within the company vocabulary. So what publications companies were giving out, and also out in the news articles if there was a match. So we found an example which really stood out for KKR Mining PLC that had high frequency topics of their relationship with publications that were close to Tanzanian workforce. The other question that was then important to be able to understand how positive these companies were trending in terms of their ESG metrics was what is the sentiment score across topics for organizations in that portfolio. And one of the things we noticed was some of these articles that matched to ESG topics were able to help us, knowing the sentiment score was able to help us reduce the noise, where the not so relevant content from either the articles or the publications that came out of the came out of the companies, we were able to discard those depending on how they ranked in terms of their score for a sentiment. And the last question, which was really fueled by the understanding and the reduction of noise in a lot of the data that we were able to answer, was what companies appear in the same context as the organizations with highly positive sentiment. So this is now being able to understand, knowing one company which has a high positive sentiment in terms of their ESG publications and efforts and messaging that they're driving. What are the related companies within that range or within that category which the investors can really think about and look at from a commonality standpoint? So I always, the two companies that really stood out were Cheniere Energy LLC and also Williams Companies, which really showed similar governance pattern, and also their performance and perception in the market showed the similar trend on what they were talking about and how they were doing in the market over the period of 3 years that we analyzed both the companies. With that, being able to understand what the companies are talking about, what ESG topics are most relevant, and being able to analyze the topics and the sentiments in a graphical way, being able to visualize them as well. We were able to identify similar companies within the portfolio which can enhance the performance in a trend that has been established, that these companies have been performing similarly along with the activities that they're doing. The other aspect, once we were able to answer the question, news data was able to help us at least reach to a point where we can identify companies that fit into a portfolio of similar performance. More recently, what the trend has seen what trend we have seen is more and more use cases coming to surface using image data. So what I wanted to talk about next for maybe a few minutes is what is that potential of all the image data that's been collected and how it can impact the ESG-led analytics. One of the main technologies that has surfaced in this area is Google Cloud's Earth Engine. That's it's a planetary scale platform that houses data of various formats, images, but of various that can impact various use cases when it comes to implementation. 4 broad areas where the Google Earth Engine really helps is in insights, where it has more than 30 years of image data that primarily captured by satellite imagery data in a time lapse at a petabyte scale. And the second aspect is the data set with a raster data set of Earth science, which again spans more than 30 years and has been cataloged for use primarily it's been now used by researchers and scientists, but it's getting opened up for more and more usage. And 2 aspects in which we can interact with Google Earth Engine. They do have an open API that is available in Python and JavaScript, and has its own integrated development environment where people can use those and use the data to build out use cases and solutions. And we also have applications, pre-built applications with UIs that help interact with the data as well. And to give a quick snapshot of what you will see, from a potential standpoint with the Google Earth Engine and the data that it houses, is images categorized in 3 broad areas. Primarily, we talk about climate and weather. It captures surface temperatures, climate, atmospheric data, and weather. And then the core image data of Landsat data, Centennial MODIS data, and also high-res imagery. So one of the use cases that really stands out is being able to identify greenwashing. So for example, if there's claims of forestation of plantations that companies are making, can you use this data to identify those areas which are claimed to have plantations and trees, be able to validate those claims and prove out the measures that companies are taking, and be able to rank and score them with proof that comes out of captured data. So what I wanted to close out and summarize with, and I know we do have 15, 20 minutes left, and I'm happy to take more questions, but really wanted to put forth the idea that there is power and potential that data can bring to the table, be it text data or image data that you would want to use to implement use cases. And there is technology available to use the data to bring use cases to fruition. And then there's impact that can be generated, like we saw with the portfolio creation that is possible, being able to understand similar companies with similar initiatives performing the similar way in their perception and market data as well. The question really is for the audience that I want to leave with is, are you ready to leverage all of this? The technology, the data, and the impact that it can create is evolved hugely in the last, I would say, at least 5 to 10 years. And that's something that everybody can make use of and then be able to leverage this data. With that, I'm done with what I had to present, but I'm happy to take any questions on the implementation aspects or other areas.
Hi, thank you for taking the time. I'm Carl with KPMG. What kinds of decisions do your customers rely on your work for?
Can you say that again? What
The
kind
work that you do for customers,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of decisions does that drive for them?
So from primarily centric around ESG, that most of the companies that we work with are either trying to build a solution that can help broader investors and issuers, right? That's one aspect of people that we work with, especially the example with the news publication org that we worked. They were trying to build a platform that, they are primarily into financial data and financial news. So their goal was, can we build a platform where we can attract more and more investors and issuers to leverage that platform to make the decisions that they are able to invest in the market and issue the right funds and bonds. So that's where we try to build a solution that they can offer to the market.
Hey, thanks for presenting this. But if I take a step back and more fundamentally, where the companies are struggling today are, one, from the concept of greenwashing. Misrepresenting what they actually are. But beyond that, where companies, especially asset management companies, are struggling are meeting the regulatory requirements of SFDR and some of that stuff. For many of the companies, you don't even have the data to really do that. So I think it's a good concept to really utilize all the NLP and everything else to see if those companies are good to invest in. But is there any work done to really look at the data from alternative sources to really fill those gaps in terms of basic reporting that is required for SFDR, as well as kind of really looking at which companies are greenwashing versus not, before kind of going into the deeper of would this be a good investment or not?
Great question. So from where the challenge, even being able to implement and do independent analysis is I alluded to before also, standardization of data doesn't exist. Not everybody is going to accept the source of data that people would want to go out, explore, and then fill the gaps into the technology. And I think a lot more work could be done in standardizing what is the source of data that is accepted across when companies do analysis and present their initiatives to the regulatory authorities, right? Identifying those verified and validated data sources is where a lot of work needs to be done. And to my knowledge, those two data sets which are verified and accepted are far and few in between. There are very large, the BlackRocks and the Vanguards who do these analysis and have come out with reports. But for accessible data, which is verified and accepted by people, and for anybody to go out there and do analysis, it's really tough at this time to get the data sets itself. Not sure if I answered your question, but the challenge really is in identifying the right data sets which are accepted across by authorities.
And my question was, all this analysis that you have done through graphing and everything else, were there any proxies identified that could serve as a proxy to some of those missing gaps or verified kind of data sources?
That's a really good point. So we I'll take that back with me as something that we could explore, because the focus of the initiative was really to prove out if the data that they have can answer a few questions for the customer. What underlying results that we didn't focus on is definitely a good area for us to go back and explore. So.
Hey, I'm Fani Paidimari from Stanley Black & Decker. Thanks for sharing good examples about your clients. Did any of your clients started reporting these out? Is it just for their internal consumption, or is it more around targeted goals that they have set for themselves?
So a lot of these, especially the first one where we were able to deep dive a little bit further, is for external use, right? For the customer is making that available, for either reporting purposes or even monetizing what they built out from a product standpoint. So that aspect does exist. From an Earth Engine standpoint, where the image data can now be used, that's more evolving. That system is just opening up for people to leverage those data. It was primarily research and scientist focus up until 2020 or 2021, if I'm not wrong. So that data set is just opening up for everybody to leverage, and we're looking forward to implementing use cases in that.
Okay. A follow-up question to that is, in terms of your model quality itself, how did you define the baseline accuracy as well as what's really good?
So it's in general model development process, as you must be aware, it's an iterative process that we go through with our clients. So we do start off with understanding at a base level, just using out of the box APIs, what results are we getting, and how much of a result is it driving for our customers or impact it is driving, and then really customizing for what a specialist or domain the customer belongs to. For example, it was all financial articles and data that was coming in. So training model for that specific custom requirement, and then being able to push the bar of accuracy. So we set off with the base of here's what's possible out of the box with no custom work that needs to go into it. Showed the result to the customer, asked for more value add from the model. So we spent time on building a custom training layer on top of the APIs to reach those 0.9 and above accuracy rates.
So more around what was the client's contribution here? How did they know what is the art of possible? I know you had the baseline model, which tells you a particular story.
Yeah.
And how did you expand on that?
So the client's contribution from what they were trying to achieve really, we went in as somebody who can answer the question that they were lingering with. Their lingering question was, can this data be of any use, right? Then for us, it was, you have this huge gold mine of data. We'll help you build the roadmap of what all it can do. We started off with building out the graph solution that we built with them. Now we're talking about what else can this data, and if we combine that with the image data which is now becoming available, would that create more impact? So we go in as, there's one identified question they're trying to answer, and then help them build a more longer transformational roadmap. thank you all for joining in person. I know it's still everybody's still opening up, so I appreciate all you guys showing up in person. And everybody online, if the mic was not working properly or couldn't hear anything, apologies for that, but thank you for joining online as well. Thank you all. Thank you.